Let's create local and global variables. In this example, we created two new functions. Inside of these functions, we assigned new values to our three variables. Our v1 and v2 variables are local variable because they only exist inside of our block for our specific function. Local variable is declared and used inside of specific process, in this case, function. Global variable can be accessed from many different functions. Our price and checkpoint variables are global variable. After we declare them, our two functions assigned new values to our global variables at specific moment. Let's now write practical example in our main function. Inside of our main function, we called our change global var function. That function will increase our price variable by 100 and we will set up new time to our checkpoint variable. Let's now call again our change global var function, but before we do that, we will delay our execution by 1 second. When we call again our change global var function, we can see that new value of our price variable is 200 and our new time for our checkpoint variable is 1 second in front in comparing with first call. Let's now again delay our execution for 1 second and then we will call our change global var 2 function. We can see that we assigned again new values to our price and checkpoint variables, but now we increase our value of our price variable by 200 and now the last price is 400. Also, value of our checkpoint variable is telling us that again 1 second is passed. Now we understood how we can declare global variables outside of any function and how we can change and modify their values inside of any function. Let's now see how we can execute function inside of our declaration of our if statement or our for loop. For this example, we will create three new functions. In first function, we are expecting two different values. In second function, we are also expecting two different values. And in third function, we are expecting one value as a slice of strings. Let's now see how we can get values from these functions inside of declarations of our if statements. Inside of our main function, in our if statement, we declared two new variables. Values of these variables will be values which we are expecting from our multiply and validate function. We didn't assign new values to our variables. Instead of that, we will assign new values from values which we are expecting from specific function. After that, we will create our condition and that in this case will be our check variable. So value of check variable is true and condition will be successful. So in this case we will print value of our sum1 variable. Let's create another example. In second if statement, we created sum2 and again check variable, but now we are expecting values from our divide and validate function. In this case, value of our check variable is false, but we are inverting value of that variable in our condition. So in this case, our condition will also be successful. Our second if statement will print value of our sum2 variable. Let's now see how we can operate with our functions inside of declaration of our for loop with our function range. We enter our for loop and then our range function will iterate over our structure function. How is that possible? Our output of this structure function will be slice of strings. This for loop will wait for our function to execute her implementation, and then over our output, our for loop will iterate with range function. Below our for loop, we can see our output. If we want to use this case over our functions, output of our functions must be array, slice, or map data type, because our range function cannot iterate over one specific value. It must be group of specific values. For this example, in our import section, we import fmt package, but also we import strconv library. This library will help us with our converting. We will create a new variable s with value of data type string. We want to convert this string into integer. We created two new variables, p and e1. Then we initialize our new variables. After that, we access our strconv library, and from that library we called specific function, which will convert our string value into our integer value. All we need to do is to pass specific string value to that function. Now the question is why we have two new variables. Our first variable p will be our new integer which we convert, and second e1 will be value of error which we are expecting from our converting function. So what we will do in this case? We will wait and check to see if our e1 value isn't equal with nil value. If that is the case, we will print our e1 variable as error. This we must do because we cannot print our p variable if we get an error from our converting function. After we check our e1 variable and we see that we don't have any error, we will print our p variable. Let's see how we can convert number data types to our string. We created new variable m with new value. We will initialize our new variable n by accessing strconv library and calling one specific function which will convert our integer into our string. We only need to pass specific integer value to our function. Then, when we print value and type of our n variable, we can see value and we can see that our data type is now a string. Also, we can execute our converting with the same library but with parsing functions, like this. So these functions will convert specific string values to our specific data type. In all these functions, we are expecting two values. First value will be converted value from our string, and second value will be error value, which we are expecting from our parsing. For any case in which we are parsing or converting our values, we must check did we get an error before we start to print or process our converting values. When we print all types of our new variables on line 28, we can see which new data types are assigned to our variables. Let's now see what is init function. Init function is pre-process which we execute before we start our main function. This init function is only connected with our main function. How we can check that? We printed new message inside of our main function, but when we execute this application, our output will be different. First message which we will see in our output will be that we tested everything before we started. Then after that we will see message from our main function, which means that any code which we put inside of our init function, will be executed before we start our main execution. This function is good to initialize some testing before we start our server or to check some dependencies which we need to have before we start our main function. Let's now see what is defer function. While init function was function as our pre-process function before our main, defer function is something totally different. Defer function will execute code or another function after we finish current process and before we start with executing the next. So now our current process is a main function. In this function, we printed one message and then two following message has defer function in front of them, which means that this code won't be executed on this place. This code will be executed after we finish our main function. Also, execution of our defer functions or code is going backwards. When we print output of our main function, first we will see the message that calculations are in progress and we must wait. After that, we won't see printing on line 8 and 9. Second message will be that capacity of our reactor is 7500. After that, we are going backwards with our code to execute our defer functions, which means that third message will be that user David has access for this function, and last message will be that user David started calculations. With this writing, we finished with our basic functions, how we can declare them, how we can build them, and we saw many ways how we can process our data. In the next video, we will start to talk about interfaces and how they can help us with our architecture.